We have two intelligence stories that demand attention. Domestic terror is the biggest threat to this country, not Venezuela, not bad leaders on the right or the left. And today we're learning of two separate arrests of terrorists. The DHS just announced that they arrested an Afghan national named Jaan Shah Safi. Like the D.C. shooter, okay, who, by the way, we now, or not we, but the government now believes may have been a target of intimidation from Islamists abroad, and that's why he killed a National Guard member and put another one in critical condition. This guy, Safi, came to the country in 2021, like the other guy, under Biden's Operation Allies Welcome. So if he was helping us there, what happened when he came here? Same question we have with the murderer. The feds say Safi provided support to the terror group ISIS-K and provided weapons to his father, who's a commander of an Afghani military group. Okay, we're also learning that you hear what happened in Delaware. These local cops make a stop. It's a Pakistani immigrant named Khan is his last name. During the stop, they find a loaded handgun, clips of ammo, body armor, and detailed plans to shoot up a campus police department. Why? To achieve martyrdom. Okay? Fundamentalism is a problem, homegrown or imported. Okay? Now, another intelligence story. I think that we are being prepared or not prepared for disappointment with this Epstein file release. Did you hear about this new FBI operation they learned about? So everybody right now is talking about what may come because the Oversight Committee, the Democrats really, just released more Epstein material. I got to tell you, I'm not impressed by what they released. I mean, my producer showed me this one creepy picture that the guy had, Epstein had a dentist chair in his house, and he had walls with weird masks of men, but so what? I'll tell you what matters to me about the Epstein thing. This FBI special redaction project. You hear about this? 1,000 agents, almost, okay? Nearly $1 million in overtime for what? Redacting the Epstein files for public release. What does that mean? Somebody who knows. Former FBI special agent and CIA officer, of course, Tracy Walder. It's good to have you. In order of my own interest, the Afghan murderer who killed the female National Guard member and put the male in critical condition, that he may have been being extorted from abroad by extreme Islamists. Do you buy it? And what's the analysis?
You know, it's hard to say, Chris. I don't not buy anything, to be completely honest with you, in this day and age. So I don't want to excuse it entirely. However, based on the arrest that you mentioned of the other individuals, the Pakistani and actually two other Afghans, they pretty much had left manifestos in terms of what they were going to do and what terrorist organization they were going to do it on behalf of. Lock and Wall, we don't have anything like that yet. And so that tells me that it really could be two things. It could be that he was suffering from PTSD and severe mental issues and had some kind of a break and took that out on the National Guard. But it could be more of what we're starting to talk about now, with him essentially being the victim of, I guess, blackmail by the Taliban. We actually have seen this. The Chinese actually have done this in New York City with individuals blackmailing their family back home if they didn't provide information back home from universities and other institutions. So this wouldn't be new, but this would really be the first time we would have seen this from the Taliban doing that. I'm just not convinced based on his stature and what he was doing here in the U.S.
You know, it would be a little bit of a common sense move, because if these guys were so committed to helping the American cause and going against their own over there, and that's how they got into America, it'd be weird for them to be like sleepers for the same people that they were trying to take out in another country. Then you have the Pakistani guy that they pulled over. Now that's more of what we've become used to. Somebody finding their way into this country who doesn't want to do good things once they're here. It's just not as popular anymore to talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to be honest, that was sheer luck that they found him. He was in a park that was closed, and they just thought, the police said they thought he was acting strange. And so we are very, very lucky that they caught him. But in the case of him, the case of Safi, and also an individual named Al Kuzay, who also came here, he threatened to blow up someplace in Fort Worth on TikTok on Thanksgiving Day as well. And what we're seeing here, we're learning more about Operation Allies Welcome and how people were vetted. And we're starting to see 50 55 individuals that got through on that were later identified on terror watch lists. So this wasn't a perfect system in terms of vetting. And I think we need to go back through.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we screwed it up both ways, right? These 55 you're talking about and all the people we left behind. I mean, I'm sure you'll remember during the Biden withdrawal, all those veterans that banded together across this country and across the world to try to save people and get them out before they got hunted down by the bad guys for helping Americans. All right, so now the story that I really hope is not what it looks like, Tracy. If the brothers and sisters at the FBI have been spending this much manpower and this much time redacting, what is the chance that when the Epstein files get released, they're going to have what everybody wants in them?
Yeah, a couple of things about that. First of all, it sounds like the redacting was done in March. So I'm not sure what we were sitting on for, what, 6, 7 months, I guess, before some of that was released. Second of all, I don't think I've ever seen a scope like that. And you have to remember, I was at CIA on September 11th. We had to provide information to the 9/11 Commission that had to be redacted in some cases. No one spent this long on doing that. And so I do have serious concerns about the veracity of the information. Certainly, we need to redact things that, would impact an ongoing investigation. I don't think anyone disputes that. But to spend that long, that intense period of time and that much overtime is very surprising to me. And like you, I do have concerns about what might be in these documents.
It's going to be used to mean they're trying to protect Trump. I just don't believe that. I don't believe that people have had access to this stuff for this long and nothing ever came out about him, and now they're covering it all up. I know that that's going to be unsatisfying to a lot of people on the left who want to believe that. I just don't believe it, not because of what I think of Trump, it's just what I think of the system and how disclosure usually works. So I've been telling everybody, if you think, that's why I say to Thomas Massie, if you got given 20 names, they weren't part of the Ghislaine Maxwell prosecution. If you were given 20 names of people who provided material support or had material knowledge of what was done to these victims, you should put them out, because I don't think they're going to be in the release. But Tracy, we'll leave that to reality. And when we learn what's in it and what isn't, I'll bring you back so you can help us understand it. But thank you for clarifying for us tonight. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.